Hey everyone, this is Mike, and for today's video I've got a minimum item level clear of God Kefka, aka 08 Savage on Gunbreaker. I was kind of disappointed with this, and the reason why I decided to make this video anyway, even though the clear that we have was definitely undeserved, is because I wanted to talk a little bit about minimum item level old content. So when we go into the future and we get more and new raid tiers going into Shadowbringers, minimum item level content in Shadowbringers content will probably still remain as difficult as it is right now. Like for example doing minimum item level Titan or something like that will probably stay just as difficult unless we see some very big job changes which make some jobs a lot more powerful, like Ninja and Summoner for example, which are expected to come. But when we go into old minimum item level content from Heavensward, Stormblood, that kind of stuff, it's become a lot easier, and one of the big reasons for that is probably the change that they made to the accessories. Now, back in Stormblood, especially for tanks this was a problem, but back in Stormblood you would often melt main stat materias on your accessories. The reason why you would do this is because tanks' damage dealing stat is strength, tanks' main stat is vitality, which did not give them damage, so tanks would melt strength on their accessories to get more damage. When looking at healers and DPS, they would very often melt vitality, which gives them more HP on their accessories when doing minimum item level content, because it gave them more HP, and having more HP would be a bigger buffer for when they would miss a shield or when there was like a piece of mitigation missing on a raid-wide buster or something like that. So because they decided to remove those, they kind of needed to find a different balance, because of course you couldn't just be like, okay, we're removing main stats, so tanks are gonna do no damage and healers and DPS are gonna have a hard time surviving raid-wide busters. So what they did in Shadowbringers is they decided to up the stats that are on the accessories. The second reason why they did this is because back in Stormblood, again, a lot of tanks, mainly tanks, sometimes DPS as well in certain scenarios, but mainly tanks, they would just stick with crafted accessories, because the upgrade from going from a crafted accessory to a raid accessory was so small, and they could get a lot more substats on the crafted accessories because those allow for pentamelding, aka getting 5 materia on your accessory. So they would just stick to crafted, and this was a really bad scenario, because now you're like, I'm raiding on a tank, but I'm actually sticking partially with crafted gear, so why even have raid accessories in the first place? So going into Shadowbringers, they changed the main stats, like of all the stats on the accessories, and made them bigger. So all of the accessories now have more stats. This goes for both tanks as well as healers and DPS. For tanks, this mainly makes it so they have more strength, aka more damage. For healers and DPS, it's more towards the HP department. But in general, there's also just more stats on the accessories. And all of these things make it so that when you now sink down into older content, you still lose all your materia bonuses, of course, because you're synced down, but you do have a lot more main stats now, or just stats in general that are synced down as well, meaning that you're going to be doing a lot more damage and that you have more HP. So when it comes to DPS checks in older content, it's a lot easier now. So when I did Unending Coil and Ultima Weapon Ultimate, back when Shadowbringers came out, like in I believe the first 4 or 5 weeks or something, me and my team back then went back to clear both of those fights, cleared both of them on Gunbreaker because I wanted to do it because I really enjoy Gunbreaker. The Unending Coil video is up on my channel as well. Of of Ultima Weapon I don't actually have any footage because I forgot to record it. But as you can see, when you go back to that one and you compare it to when I first cleared Unending Coil on Ninja, you'll see that the difference in how fast all of the bosses die is huge. Now, it might not be super huge for some people, like the difference, but when you've done the fight so many times, like a boss just dying, let's say 30 seconds faster, is actually a very big difference, especially because the fights are supposed to be level capped, or like item level capped at least. Now, I decided to dismiss it a little bit back when we did the ultimates, because the ultimates are capped at 5 item levels higher than their intended item level. They did this because previously, when you would re-clear the fights in Stormblood when they weren't on content anymore, if you were to sink down with your gear, you would lose materia bonuses. So they decided, you know what, we'll give 5 extra item levels so that people that do sink down with new gear they'll have more stats to kind of make up for the loss of the materia that is now void. So that's why I didn't really look at it too much. But now that we got Kefka minimum item level as well, this fight did sink us down to the minimum item level that was like available back then, which was 350. So we didn't have that extra 5 item level buffer that we had on the ultimates. And we still did a whole lot more damage than we were supposed to do. So as you can see in this clear, we have a lot of people dying, a lot of people making mistakes. We have a lot of damage downs going out as well, which the damage down is pretty severe. Like, you don't want to get that, and especially not on your whole team. You'll see that I have like one at some point, or 2 of them, or at least after I get the second one I immediately die afterwards anyways. But you'll see people running around with a lot of damage down markers. You'll see a lot of people die as well. We use a healer limit break somewhere in the middle, and I believe we have another LB3 at the end that doesn't even get used at all. We have like 3 people alive by the time the enrage comes around, which was just me and the 2 healers, I believe. So there was a lot of things that went wrong, and a lot of things that should have made making the DPS check impossible, yet we still managed to make it. So for me, it's not a deserved clear, but I kind of want to put this video out there anyways to kind of talk about this issue. It's maybe not really an issue, but it might feel like less of an achievement for people that have never done the old content, and they're like, oh, I want to kind of experience the old content like it was back then, with the minimum item level, because a lot of people think when you go minimum item level, this was the way that people used to clear it week 1, which used to be the case, and it'll probably be the case when you do minimum item level Shadowbringers content. But when you go back into the old ultimates or into the old Savage fights, if you do put minimum item level on, you're still going to be a little bit stronger than you used to be back then. So it's still an achievement, of course, to clear them, because you still somewhat need to do the mechanics, but it is a lot easier to drag your team through them than it used to be, because back in the day you really needed your team to be on point in order to be able to clear it before the DPS check when you were in minimum item level than it is now, because right now people have more HP and have more damage, even though you have selected that minimum item level option. So maybe if you really wanted to have the same challenge as back then, you might need to go back and actually purchase the old gear, like the old 350 gear, like for example for this fight, in order to have the same stats that you had back then. But when you sink down, you will have this increased item level compared to back then. So with this video I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit, because it kind of bumped me out that I can't just sink down anymore and have the minimum item level and kind of have the same challenge that we did back then. There's also a lot of people that I know that really love doing minimum item level stuff for the challenge. So I just say, if you want to do it for the challenge like people did back then, just try and go and get some minimum item level gear instead of actually sinking down using the option in the duty finder. So with all of that being said, kind of like a mini PSA and a rant, I guess you could say, and like some Gunbreaker footage of this fight, if people are interested in maybe doing it. So with all of that being said, if you want to do minimum item level stuff and you want to get the same challenge as people did back then, go get the actual gear instead of sinking down with the gear that you have now, because the gear that you have now has a lot more stats on it than you were supposed to have back then. So with all of that being said, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.